Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of In Lay Terms. I'm your host, Payman Askari, and today we have a very special guest, Mr. Jayant Bhandari. How are you?
I'm very well, Payman. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I hear you're in Vancouver now. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. I come
Uh,
here at least once a year for a seminar that I run called Capitalism and Morality, and the next one is on Saturday, the 1st of June.
oh, well, that was going to be my first question. So, can you tell us a little bit about this seminar and why you decided to host them in the first place?
So I've been running this for the last 15 years. It's an annual seminar. I used to live in Vancouver before I moved to Philadelphia and then to San Francisco. The reason I started the seminar was that I was a new immigrant to Canada, and I had this huge appreciation for the Western civilization and Western values. And I realized over a period of time that Western people and Canadians were losing contact with the Western values and Western civilization. Wokeism was starting to emerge. A sort of degradation of the society was starting to happen. And these people had started to look at the third world with a kind of romanticism that was completely unwarranted because the third world countries are very wretched countries. You can pretty much do anything in the third world countries. You can kill and murder people and rape people, and it's perfectly fine. You get away with those things. But I wanted to remind people in the Western society that there was something inherently great and wonderful and marvelous about the Western society, something that needed to be preserved because what they had was the only civilization any life form has ever had. It was Europeans who created civilization, which started to distinguish human beings from animals. So, so I want to bring in all kinds of people to speak their mind, to speak about issues that they don't normally talk about in public because there's now a huge fear of getting cancelled. So I want to provide them a forum, but I want a forum for open discussion of several issues that affect all of us.
So the name of this show is In Lay Terms. I'm trying to take complicated issues and simplify them for the audience. And what always happens is I end up irritating the guest with with all these questions. So my first basic question is you talk of Western values. What are Western values to you?
Payman, I grew up in a third world country, and when I arrived in the United Kingdom about 30 years back, I realized that the meanings I associated with words like truth or socialism or compassion were completely different from what they actually meant in practice in the United Kingdom. Uh, uh, where I grew up, you speak what gets you your resources, what is expedient, what gets you what you want. You don't necessarily speak the truth. You speak the truth. You well, you actually your foundations is not based on truth. Also, I thought socialism was more about elitism. It was about into getting into position of power to command lives of other people and to expropriate their resources. So these were the erroneous associations I had with these words. And this was the case because I grew up in a society where truth did not exist, where compassion did not exist, where equality and individuality did not exist, where the individual had no rights. The person in power decided what rights you had. So it was an evolution over a period of time and over the last 30 years.
Okay, let's explore that a little further. First of all, where are you from originally?
I grew up in the hellhole of India.
I guess a caution to the audience. Mr. Bhandari has a really good sense of humor. Um, can you give us an example? Like, I think where you're going at, my question was, what are Western values? And you're basically saying rights, sort of like almost God-given rights. What is a right that we have in Canada, or we had 20 years ago, that you wouldn't have, you don't have in India?
Okay, so let me continue expanding on what I said. I said truth, individuality, respect for the individual, the concept of honor. The concept of honor does not exist where I grew up in India. There's no concept of discipline either. Someone says that he wants to meet you at 10 o'clock in the morning and might not come for the whole day, might come the next day, or might come 3 days later and might not even apologize for that. There's no concept of honor. Having no concept of honor means that there are your contracts with people have no validity. They will dishonor your contracts when the time comes. Virtually every time I have had contracts with individuals in India, they have fallen through because they will come back to you at a later time and say, hey, we did not think through that one aspect, so we have to redo the contract. So, they always, there's no concept of honor in that country. Whereas, Payman, I've been living in the Western society for the last 30 years, and I just got into a deal with a company yesterday in Vancouver, and it was a verbal contract. We did not even finalize the number yet. And we did the deal. And I am absolutely sure that I will not have any problems getting my money when the time comes. So that is the difference. And it's not about rights given by the government. Governments are always there, and Canadian government is becoming increasingly bigger and tyrannical with time. But when I say about Western values and Western civilization, I'm talking about the people, the way the society works, the fact that if I have a problem on the street, it is more likely that someone will come and speak for me than go against me. If I have an accident, someone is not going to come and try to steal my wallet, for example. If I loan friend some money, it is more likely than not in the West that the money will return back to me. Whereas in India, I have given money to many people I have known, knowing fully well not a penny of that will ever come back, and not a penny ever came back as well. So that's the difference. It's a difference of values we hold, which are entrenched in our emotions, and these are these are what I call the Western values.
Okay, last question before moving on. What do you think it is that has caused the West to be more honorable, as you put it, whereas India or my country in Iran, its honor is it's in a state of flux?
Well, it's a 3 millennia long process. The Europeans were the first people. I'm talking about Greco-Roman philosophers. They were the first people who designed this concept of reason. Now, those people who have grown up in a society that uses the concept of reason to decide to analyze issues, it looks as if the concept of reason is a God-given natural existence. That is not the case at all. The concept of reason is something very, very unique. And if you talk with a person from the third world, if you pay attention, you very quickly realize that virtually all of them have no concept of reason. They can't really decide. They can't really weigh things. They don't really have the mental framework to compare things. There's no concept of causality among those people. So this started to emerge in Europe, in Greece, and then Rome, the concept of reason. And you read the book, The Republic, or other dialogues of Socrates, or you read of other philosophers in Greece, and you realize that the third world, which is pretty much 2/3 of the world, hasn't even started the concept of reason. They can't even do basic counting. It is not unlikely that I give $20 to someone in Congo, and she might give me the stuff I want to buy and still return me $22. So they don't have the concept of math either. So, that was the initial phase of European civilization, which probably set the foundations right. And then came Christianity. Christianity laid the moral fabric, and you can then go to Saint Augustine or Thomas Aquinas, and you realize that they help merge the concept of reason with Christianity. But even before that, if you read about the Franks and the barbarians, from what I understand, Payman, and I have not really done a deep study on that subject, but these were very honorable people. They were warriors, and being warriors is very honorable. Now I understand that being a warrior leads to violence, but without being a warrior, you can't have peace either, because people will come and dominate you. So again, these are the European concepts which intermingled, entwined over a period of time, and gave rise to what became Western civilization, an extremely prosperous, extremely open-minded civilization, which is truly unique even to this day, despite that we now have Trudeau, we have wokeism, we have progressivism, we have liberalism. So it is still a great civilization.
Thank you for that detailed answer. We're going to move on to the issue of immigration and citizenship. I have a whole bunch of detailed questions, but I wanted to get your perspective. What do you think is going on in Canada with all of this mass immigration?
It has already happened. There's nothing going on anymore. It's already happened. Canada has committed suicide. Today, I'm just talking about the pure census figures, and I don't really have to make any numbers up. If you look at the United States, people under the age of 18, if you look at their demographics, more than 50% of those are of non-European ethnicity. Similarly, Canada is just a bit behind the United States. Close to 45% of Canadian citizens are either first or second generation Canadians. And then remember that until the 1970s, 90% of immigrants who came to Canada came from Europe. Now, 90% of immigrants who come to Canada come from the third world countries. The dominant ones are like India or Nigeria or Afghanistan. Afghanistan is the third or the fourth biggest supplier of immigrants to Canada. And now Justin Trudeau is sending planes to bring people from Gaza. Payman, I have looked at immigrants very closely, and I have lived in many Western countries, and I've seen the changes happening among immigrants over a period of time. And I have tried to understand how different the next generation is from the first generation that came to Canada. Firstly, what I have seen is that virtually all of these third world immigrants come to the West for only one thing, and that is for money. They think it's easy, the life is comfortable and making money is easier. So they come here for money, but their heart stays what they left behind, which is their homeland. So they are split emotionally all their lives. But the first generation comes with a certain magnitude of gratitude. Now, remember, the concept of gratitude does not exist in these hellhole-ish third world countries. They don't say thank you and please. And when I return back to India, Payman, I don't say thank you and please either, because you are seen as weak and you are seen as stupid. So these kind of people come to Canada, and because their sole focus is money, not Western civilization or to seek liberty, they start hating the West as well over a period of time. Now, there are, of course, exceptional cases, but I'm talking about the vast majority of these people. Now, what happens in the second and third generation is that even that vague gratitude that these people had in the first generation goes away. And also remember that all kinds of people require a certain kind of policing. And that might be very harsh policing in certain countries. Now, if you remove that kind of policing from them, they go completely feral and wild, because then they think they can get away with anything. because we have to develop restraints within ourselves. Civilizational process is about creating internal restraints. And if a society is incapable of developing internal restraints, which is honor and discipline and respect for others, truth and integrity, if you fail to develop them from within, then external devices naturally must come up, either through reason or through Taliban kind of administration. And what I see, Payman, is that across the third world, Taliban kind of systems are emerging or will eventually emerge. But coming back to Canada, which was your question, the problem is you're bringing in this third world non-culture to Canada of people who don't fit in, whose hearts are elsewhere. They never assimilate. In fact, they become worse with time. And now you have something like 40 to 50% of Canadians who are like those. And who do they vote for? They vote for their own tribal people. You look at all the ghettos we have. We have Eritrean ghettos, we have Indian ghettos, we have, all kinds of Muslim ghettos. And even among Muslims, we have Afghani Muslim ghettos, we have Pakistani Muslim ghettos. And they vote on tribal basis. They do not vote on the basis of the value that the Western values I was talking about. They don't vote on merit, if I can use that word. They vote on tribal issues. They vote for their own kind of people. And the end result is that, as Trudeau rightly said, we now have we are a post-national country. Our cabinet is not represented by meritorious people. Our cabinet has people based on the ratio of sex in the society, which might now also include LGBTQ. It has ratios based on ethnic composition of Canada. But the reality is that the non-European people and people are incapable of assimilating. The only hope is for East Asians, because they have a tendency to assimilate a lot better than anyone else, except, of course, for Europeans.
Again, you pretty much answered this, but this whole concept of multiculturalism, we've abandoned assimilation, and now we've come up with this marketing term that sounds so cute. We want to be multicultural, and everyone's nice to everyone. How is this? The issue is multiculturalism, right?
It's an absolute disaster. I mean, this is the most stupid concept I have ever come across, really. What is multiculturalism? Multiculturalism, believing in it means that morality is relative, because multiculturalism basically means that whatever anyone is doing because of his culture is perfectly fine, which automatically leads to a society with moral relativism. Nothing is objective in their mind. No value is objective. No value is to be honored. And you don't really want to assimilate anymore in the Western society. So these people just become their own ghettos. And now, Payman, when I came to Canada, there were probably a rare ghetto in Canada. Now there are ghettos all over the country. Because of this multiculturalism, we don't really require, and I'm talking about Canada, Canada does not require immigrants to assimilate and become a part of Canada. In fact, because we are bringing in 1 million people every year, we are allowing them to go and live within a ghetto of their own people, which means that they never ever assimilate, and they become very ossified because they are just a microcosm of their homeland in Canada.
I want to switch over to intent. The Liberal Party, principally, what are they getting out of bringing 1 or 2 million people over every year? Is it purely to push the progressive agenda, or is it a financial element as well?
Well, there are various factors behind it, and the most honorable factor behind that would be that people like Trudeau and our cabinet people are just naive and stupid. They have no concept of realities of life. All they did was teach in a primary school in Canada, or taught snowboarding to rich kids on Whistler Mountain. So if that is your background, maybe you just simply don't have a concept of how the world works, that people can be evil, people can be satanic, people can be stupid. You simply are not aware of those things. Now, if you were smoking cannabis in the meantime, then you are living in your bubble. And I think that's where partly Trudeau comes from. That's his thinking. The second problem is that immigrants vote predominantly for the leftist parties. So the whole spectrum of uh, uh, our political views have continued to shift leftwards. The Republican Party and the Party of America is more leftist today than the Democratic Party was in the 1960s, for example. Exactly the same thing is happening in Canada. When I look at the agenda of the Conservative Party, and when I listen to Pierre Pierre of Conservative Party, I realize that he's talking as if he's a liberal. He's very leftist. He wants to welcome all the people from around the world. He wants to, he goes to all these tribal meetings. Now, I have nothing against going to, any religious meeting or. But why should a politician be getting involved in this and making a political ploy out of it? Because he wants that community to collectively give him votes. So this is, and then they pander to these minority groups. For example, one group that I know intimately is the Sikh group. Sikh are the people who came to Canada. A lot of them falsely claiming that they were refugees, they were under threat in India, and perfectly fine that they wanted to move to Canada, but then they now want to create chaos in Canada by fighting here for freedom, for secession movement in India. Now, I'm all for them. I'm actually sympathetic to their idea, but they should go back to India and fight. Canada is not a place to do your fight. This is the country which gave you refuge. So again, this is the strange kind of multiculturalism that we have allowed to emerge in Canada.
I want to pick up on something you said about Pierre Poilievre, who gets up in Parliament and says, I love all the people of the world. So somebody listening to you, I'm doing devil's advocate now. They're going to say, Mr. Bhandari, how dare you say this? All of these immigrants, they have wives they love, they have children they love. Who, like, there's no difference. We're all children of God. Like, how do you counter that message?
Yeah, I mean, these are very simplistic, new age concepts. These are not the concepts that existed, my guess is 70, 80 years back. These are not the concept on which East Asia is based. If you try going to Japan or Korea or China or Singapore or Hong Kong as refugees, they will throw you out very quickly. They don't accept refugees. They don't accept immigrants. So, what is this love about? I can love people, and I think Canada should love people. And if there are people who are suffering genuinely, I actually don't have a problem. I would be more open-minded than East Asians and say, hey, our doors are open. Come in. We are never going to give you our citizenship. When the time comes, you have to go back. And if you create a problem here, we will send you back anyway. So, love does not exist in nature. Love, by just being loving and warm-hearted, I can't get resources. We are dependent on resources. We have to pull our own weight. But if we just love and have compassion without a feedback system, that leads to this absolutely crazy welfare system that we have created in Canada, which now actually means that if you fall sick, it's not easy for you to get a treatment. I'm better off because I'm in America, where the medical system is more in the hands of the capitalists. So, using nice words is easy, but is it going to lead to an improvement in lives of people, or these are only going to be gaudy words, just show off words, just the facade? Because at the end of the day, you have to create a society, and so discipline requires suffering, and it's not just about love and compassion. These are very new age focus terms.
Okay. Regarding Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, China, Singapore, and immigration, you've talked about how you admire their version better, where it's very easy to go there and work, but it's very difficult to get citizenship. Can you speak to that?
Okay, so I admire East Asia to the extent that they are actually people who have very nicely copied the Western civilization. This has been going on for about 200 years. The Japanese sent their teams to Western countries to start learning about Western culture in 1850s, 1860s. So they were people who brought in Western ways of thinking and Western ways of institutional building. That's what Japan did. That's what Korea copied. That got independently emerged in Hong Kong and Singapore under the governance of the British. And eventually, if you go to China, they look like, many cities of China look like Singapore. So, they have directly or indirectly copied the Western values, Western civilizations, and Western institutions. What they have done a good job of is that they have preserved and actually improved on those things. So if you want to have pride parade there, or if you want to sexualize kids, or if you want to do a drag show in front of a 3-year-old baby, sorry, you're going to end up in prison, and I'm very happy about it. If you're going to go around selling drugs to kids, hey, you can't even think about buying drugs in any of those countries because those countries are completely closed. That is exactly what the Western society was until about 50, 60 years back. If you did a crime in the United States, a small crime meant that you went to prison for a long time. And this was until very recently. But now in California, where I live, if you steal stuff worth about $900 or $999 or something, you're not even charged. That's absolutely crazy. Whereas in any of these countries in East Asia, if you do the same thing, hey, you're going to get into deep, deep trouble. So they have basically, East Asia has done a very good job of copying Western civilization and not only maintained it, they might even have improved on those values.
So if somebody, a policymaker was listening to this, what advice would you have for them to make it so it takes 7 years to get a citizenship? Do you have to prove that you can support yourself for the next 10 years financially?
Oh, just stop giving citizenship anyway. You have you should just it's good for me, payment. I came here because I wanted to get a Canadian passport. I lived here for just over 180 years, over 3 years, and I got my Canadian passport. Well and good for me. But is it good for Canada when you are bringing in 1 million people every year? It's an absolute disaster for Canada. Now, I have nothing against bringing in people if they are really suffering where they came from. But always remember, payment, that those people came here because they were the people who created the situation that they left behind. So they are going to recreate the same situation in Canada as well. So they are the virus that is running away from the disease that the virus created. So they are not all that innocent. What can you do? Just don't give them citizenship for 3 generations and then reassess. But for the time being, payment, as I already said, can the United States, even if they stopped all kinds of immigration today, within about 10 years to 10 to 15 years, it will be an ethnically non-European society. And that means that United States has committed suicide. Something very similar has happened in Canada as well. Europe has a bit more a margin of error there, but I'm not sure because getting ethnic data about Europe is very difficult to come by. So I don't know I'm not so sure about Europe, but Europe might have a slight hope. But whatever it is, there's a civil war already coming. So forget about, again, it's now too late to think about what the policymakers should do. Yes, they should stop immigration completely, but they should also be aware that a civil war is coming across the Western world because they have brought in so many people who simply don't fit into in the Western society. Just an example, Payman. Last week I was in Calgary and I took the subway from one part of Calgary to another part of Calgary. About 15 people walked in. I don't even know the language they were speaking, but they were actually mentally deformed. They were not even normal people. They were fighting with each other. They were completely drunk. And they were smelly. I had to basically leave that wagon and move to another one to avoid getting into any arguments with those people. But you can't really have a law against these things. What is the law going to say that, hey, you can't create noise above a certain decibel? You have to have people who, through social opprobrium and through a sort of domestication, become civilized. But if they don't, then you have to really understand and not let them in. But we are far too late for that.
You've said that Europe has basically committed suicide by letting in a lot of Muslims and a lot of North Africans. What's your view on Europe versus Canada? Because Europe had the migrant crisis about a decade before us, right?
Not necessarily, Payman. And firstly, let me expand on this. This is not just about Africans and Muslims. It's also about Hindus. It's about everything to do with the third world countries, and Christians to do with the third world countries as well. It does not matter necessarily what religion they are of. They have the same third world problems. They bring the virus of the third world to the first world. Now, there was a migrant crisis in Europe, but that was only seemed to be a crisis because these were refugees walking into Europe. But the United States and Canada have willingly imported those people. So, it's become very politically correct to say, hey, I'm for legal immigration, but I'm against illegal immigration. But that's just a political correct facade for something that you should be thinking through, because you need to stop all immigration, irrespective of whether it's legal or illegal. And what is legal immigration, Payment? I can go out in Vancouver to the corner and get any drug I want. Similarly, in India, I can go a kilometer away to the business center and get all kinds of immigration documents prepared to move into Canada. It's just everyone knows about it. Every application is cooked. All the resumes are made. Fake certificates are prepared. For a price, everything is available, and not a very expensive price. And you apply for it. I know people who used fake documents to immigrate to Canada. They are completely incompetent. So the problem is that while the migration crisis of Europe was the headline news, North America has been worse because it has effectively brought in a lot more people. As I said, just about close to 50% of North Americans are now of non-European ethnicity, and that's a disaster. And this is why it is a disaster, Payman. Tell me one country. There are 200 countries, so statistically we have a lot of societies to look at. Tell me one country that is non-European, which is non-European majority, or a non-East Asian majority, and is still a civilization. There is none. So these are the only two kind of people who have the capability to create civilization. The moment you lose their political power, and you can lose political power even if you are 70%, because half of any population is crazy anyway. We have really destroyed the Western society.
Do you think that I sense your caution? Things are getting really bad, but do you think that they're getting better? Like Europe, there's a lot of anti-immigration parties that are moving in.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why I said I'm slightly optimistic about Europe, but civil war is coming nevertheless, because right-wing parties will lead to a hastening of civil war. But in Canada and United States, that is baked in the cake. You really can't do, even if you emerge, bring out all kinds of right-wing organization, the supremacist organizations, or all kinds of crazy people as well, the blowback people. But you can't undo the fact that 50% of North America is now pretty much people of non-European ethnicity. So it is not in. This is too little, too late for the Western society. And irrespective of whether they end immigration today or not, the fact remains that the civil war across the Western world is coming, and that's not too far away, in my view. And just finally, Payman, I also understand that in Canada, people are starting to think about problems to do with immigration. And that is clearly, as you can imagine, that's going to lead to increase in racism. That's going to lead to a lot of social problems, and they will end up in a civil war eventually.
I have noticed just in the last few weeks, like the amount of anger towards immigrants has gone up, and people, they don't seem to make the connection that the anger should be directed at the policymakers like Justin Trudeau, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Brian Mulroney. I don't
I
know. What do you
completely
think?
agree. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can pass the blame to whosoever you want to. The fact remains that those immigrants are a problem, and I can see that problem. As I just said, the issue in Calgary, it just infuriated me. Calgary was just a nice, a small city at one point of time, but it's, kids crossing the road while cars are trying to drive through, hindering the traffic and creating risks for everyone. Or this metro issue where they probably don't even buy tickets, and no one has the courage to ask them for tickets because you don't want to look racist. Or just the loudness, drunkenness they exhibit, and there's no one to stop them. So that has, there is going to be anger eventually, and there is an emerging anger. I can see that. But again, as I said, it's too little, too late. And even if you have not lost your full majority, as it might be the case in some of the European countries, a civil war is still coming, because the more conscious you are of what immigrants from the third world are all about, the more then even if they are 20 or 30% of the population, it's going to be a horrendous task to deal with that situation.
Can you explain for us, when you say civil war, like what would that look like to you?
Oh, you're talking about, should I say mass scale culling of people? Yes, this is coming. This is a very ugly situation Trudeau has created by not thinking through what he's doing. This will lead to an enormous amount of violence and strife in the country. Right now, Payman, virtually every friend I have in Canada or the United States thinks in terms of retreating to a gated community. Now, that's either a real gated community or something that's a segregated community. Segregation is rampantly increasing in North America. Uh, so, people are of their own. People are living with the people of their own kinds, and this can, when a tipping point happens, this can go absolutely crazy, and it will not be a pleasant experience for either of the sides, because the blowback will be led by another irrational group. So this is not going to be a peaceful situation. It will be very ugly, and it will harm a couple of generations of the Western society. The question remains: why did the West do all this? I mean, they were just such a prosperous, peaceful, decent society. They destroyed themselves.
Do you want to go on and answer your own question?
Wow. Okay. Well, that's interesting, Payman. Why did they do that? And that's something that I think about a lot these days. Why did East Asia not committed suicide, whereas the Western society did? I don't have a clear answer to that, but I'm increasingly thinking that it was very likely the US that started the whole process because they had an heterogeneous population to start with. They were the most heterogeneous Western society, and the desegregation is started. And today, as you can see, the you know the U.S. is not a racist society, and I live in the U.S. However, the race consciousness has increased. The sex consciousness has increased in the U.S. since the 1960s and 70s. And I think that is where political correctness uh, uh, increased quite a bit in the United States. And the US was pretty much commanding the way of thinking of the rest of the Western world. And they influenced other countries as well. Now, I'm still thinking of this. I actually travel a lot between the East Asia and North America. I'm back in China in 3 or 4 days' time. And I want to always think about these days, this is what occupies my mind. Why did the Western society committed suicide and not East Asia? I'm still working on this, but this is my initial thought that maybe it is the original sin of the United States that it was a heterogeneous society that led to was the catalyst that one after another, like dominoes, created this problem in the Western society.
All right, my final question. You said something that I found really interesting. No one's ever said this. You said that decolonization by the British Empire, decolonization of the British Empire was a mistake. Why did you say that?
Oh, it was a disastrous mistake because about 2/3 of the world's population live in the third world countries, which were decolonized. Now, what happened when British, Europeans, Christian missionaries moved to these third world countries was that they removed the Taliban kind of systems in those organizations, in those societies. They removed this tribal governance that these countries had and instituted Western institutions on these countries, on the third world countries. The problem is that the local people cannot run those Western institutions because they don't have the culture to run those Western institutions. So I can mostly talk about, let's say, I can still talk about Sub-Saharan Africa. I've traveled a lot. I can also talk about Latin America. I've traveled a lot, but I go to India 3 or 4 times a year, and I have consistently seen that absolutely nothing works in that country because neither do you have those Taliban kind of tribal organized institutions, nor do you have Western institutions either, because those Western institutions have been upended. They have become predatory. Instead of serving people what they were designed for, because of the nature of the people, because of the local culture, those institutions have been completely subverted and become predatory. I'm right close to where I grew up in India, in a city called Sagar. A girl was raped about 6 years back. Over these 6 years, the rapist killed her brother, her mom, her dad, and she was killed 2 or 3 days back. So over the last 6, 7 years, they have killed the whole family, but no court, no police, no politician is there to come out and say what a brave family that they fought until the end. But no, there's no one, no social anger against it that, hey, how could this go on? Because nothing works in that company. I have been to courts in India. The first thing you do right in front of the judge is to start paying cash bribes to people. Now, how can you have the rule of law where bribes are exchanged right in front of the judge? Everything runs on bribe and connections in at least in India, and from what I see in the rest of the third world countries as well. So the Western institutions don't work, and we have removed the original Taliban-like tribal governments from those countries. Slowly and surely, all these third world countries will revert to their pre-colonial existence, which means that Afghanistan is just the first domino. Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, these will all become, they will fall apart. They will become more and more Taliban-like as time goes by. These countries will fall into pieces as well. There's something, an extension of all this payment that because Europeans came, if you just look at the population graphs of these countries, the third world country populations grew by about 20 times in the last 500 years because of Western technology, Western medicine, Western green revolution. And all the fruit of those have been plucked. So I would not be surprised if 90 to 95% of third world population disappear in famine and war within your and my lifetime. This is really ugly what you see happening in the third world. So third world and the Western society are really screwed.
Mr. Bhandari, this has been it's been a lot of educational, and it's been very honest, I guess. But I'd like to end the show on like a positive note. So what words of optimism do you have for the audience, or what suggestions do you have for people that are hoping to stand up for Canada?
Well, Payman, this is a problem. Positive thinking and optimism are new age superstitious words. They don't necessarily have just because they are used and accepted so often that these superstitions have permeated our society, and we think that we should be positive thinking people. I think the reality is what it is, and I can't just by being positive, I can't change the situation. As I said, Canada and the US have committed harakiri. It's baked in the cake that they are going to destroy themselves and there will be a civil war. Europe can protect itself, but if you really, really want to be optimistic, which is objectively optimistic, Canada isn't the place to feel positive about. It is East Asia. China continues to do well. I really like what's happening in Korea and Taiwan and Japan. So I think if there is a case for optimism, it's East Asia, not in the Western society today.
Very well. And Mr. Bhandari, for people that want to know more about you, do you have a website, or can they find you on social media?
Well, I have a website, jayantbhandari.com. My writing talks go on that website. I also do a conference, a yearly conference, Capitalism and Morality. The next one is on the 1st of June, 2024 in downtown Vancouver.
Well, Mr. Bhandari, I wanted to thank you very much for coming on and sharing your time with us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Payman.